2 years ago, I covered the Lewiston, Maine mass shooting. I hated making that video, not because it wasn't important, but because nobody wins when innocent people get slaughtered. Survivors don't win, families don't win, communities don't win. And now, 2 years later, I'm covering something that might honestly piss me off even more. Because this isn't about the shooter. This is about what happened after. This is about people who survived hell and then got screwed by the very system that claimed it existed to help them.
We all met in an auditorium in the school, and they told us that night that 100% of the funds would go to the victims. And then I received the email, too, to say that.
That email from the Maine Community Foundation says it is, quote, to help ensure survivors and victims know that 100% of all donations go to victims, survivors of this tragic event.
Let's pause right there, because this is the foundation, no pun intended, of everything that comes after. People didn't donate because they wanted to support community initiatives. They didn't donate because they wanted to fund nonprofits. They donated because 18 people were murdered and others were fighting to survive. That 100% wasn't marketing fluff. That was a moral contract.
Now, those families are crying foul because they say a large chunk of that money, nearly 30% of it, went not to them, but to 29 different nonprofits.
Nearly 30%. Not a clerical error, not rounding, not a fee, 30%. That's 1.9 million. And before anyone tries to spin this is not about whether nonprofits do good work in general. This is about lying to victims.
Jennifer, who received only $32,000, struggled to pay for her surgeries.
It didn't really hit me and really upset me until I was in a position with a $93,000 hospital bill that I couldn't cover.
Read that again. She was shot twice, she survived, and she's still drowning. This is the part people conveniently forget when they talk about survivors. Survival doesn't mean recovery. It means lifelong medical bills, permanent damage, a body that never works the same again. And while she's doing math in her head, trying to figure out how to pay $93,000, someone else is cutting checks to nonprofits. Now, before we go any further, I want to slow this down for a second because context matters. I've never hidden the fact that I'm not a fan of anti-gun organizations. I spend a lot of my time critiquing the way they operate, the emotional manipulation, the fear-based messaging, the way mass shootings are sometimes used as leverage to push policies that, in my view, don't actually make people safer. But here's the part that always gets lost online. Just because I oppose those organizations doesn't mean I believe that people who support them are evil. Most people who donate to anti-gun causes aren't trying to hurt anyone. They're not celebrating violence. They're not exploiting tragedy. They're reacting emotionally to something horrific. We share the same starting point. We don't want innocent people to die. Where we disagree is how to prevent that. So when donors, regardless of political belief, give money believing it will help victims, and when survivors believe that money exists to help them rebuild their lives, that trust deserves to be protected, which makes what comes next even worse.
Well, tonight, less than 24 hours after our report aired, Lewiston City Council member Iman Osman, who is a Somali refugee, is stepping down. He didn't give a reason, but News Nation has learned his nonprofit was one of dozens that received some of that money raised for these shooting victims.
So just to reset, Lewiston had one of the worst mass shootings in our country's history. The country rallied behind, raised a bunch of money, over $6 million. There was the Maine Community Foundation. They promised everybody that all of the monies were going to go to the victims and their families. Well, it turns out that about 30%, 1.9 million, went not to the families and victims, but went to nonprofits. And we found that at least 9 of them were immigrant-focused. At least 7 of them were Somali-linked nonprofits. Now, one of those nonprofits is the Lewiston Auburn Youth Network. They received $65,000. The Somali man who runs it, Imam Osman, sworn in as city councilor this week. He stepped down this morning, and so we've done some digging. He's facing felony gun charges. He has pled not guilty to that.
Now the picture is clear. This isn't some vague allegation. This isn't a spreadsheet error. This isn't we didn't realize where the money was going. This is a city council member running a nonprofit whose organization received $65,000 from a fund that was explicitly marked as 100% for mass shooting victims. Meanwhile, an actual survivor shot twice received $32,000 and was left staring down a $93,000 hospital bill. And here's the part where the irony gets so dark it almost stops being believable. Money raised off a mass shooting was routed to a nonprofit controlled by a man who is now facing felony gun charges. Like, seriously. And again, because I refuse to let this get twisted, this is not an immigration argument. This is not a race argument. This is an accountability argument. Victim money is not community money. Victim funds are not a slush fund, and tragedy is not a justification to blur ethical lines, because once you start deciding that some other cause deserves the money more than the people who were shot, you've crossed from helping into exploitation. And this is where this story circles back to something I said 2 years ago, not as a gotcha, but as a warning. When I covered the Lewiston shooting originally, my focus wasn't politics for politics' sakes. It was about how systems fail people before, during, and after violence, how policies make people feel safe right up until they don't, and how when things go wrong, the people who suffer the most are almost always the ones with the least power and the least protection. That's why I said this at that time. We kindly ask that you refrain from bringing firearms in this building, and we would appreciate it if you left them in your vehicle. Please keep our atmosphere family friendly. Those were the words posted on a sign on the front entrance of the Just-in-Time Recreation Bowling Alley, where 7 people were murdered by a man with a gun who didn't give a about that sign. This is what breaks people's trust. Not guns, not disagreements, not debates. It's when tragedy becomes a revenue stream. It's when survivors realize that even after the bullets stop, there are still hands in their pockets. I don't expect everyone to agree with me on gun policy, but I do believe that vast majority of people can honestly agree that the money designated for victims of a mass shooting or even gun violence in general should go to the victims of mass shooting or gun violence in general. One thing's for certain and 2 things are for sure. Politicians and tech giants don't want gun content to be recommended to you, and we're all fighting this culture war together. Now, you can help do your part by liking, commenting, subscribing to the channel, but most importantly, sharing this video with at least one person. Together we can stop the suppression of our 2A rights. And don't forget to click the link in the description section of this video for the products that I mentioned in this video.